Now, the investigation is proceeding at what officials call a substantial pace. The Justice Department says the man viewed as a material witness who was served with an arrest warrant yesterday afternoon is the same man who was taken into custody Thursday night at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. Thursday evening, about a dozen men were questioned, but only one was kept in custody. Law enforcement sources say that he was acting suspicious and presented airport officials with some confusing identification cards where his name was different on his personal ID card versus the name he had listed on an FAA pilot's license that he presented to authorities. Law enforcement sources say he is not cooperating at this time, but believe he has some vital information related to the hijackers and also the terrorist attacks. Meantime, another major development. Law enforcement officials say 2 men were taken into custody at an Amtrak train station in Fort Worth, Texas. Sources say that the men are proving to be, quote, very instrumental. At the train station in Texas, they were stopped by officers who took them in for questioning for suspicion of drugs. Now, the men had on them approximately $5,000 in cash and box cutter knives, similar to the ones used in Tuesday's attack. The men were taken into custody by the INS for immigration violations, but authorities say that they believe that they could provide some very helpful details about Tuesday's attacks and the terrorist network itself. They were taken to New York last night for further interviews and are being interviewed as well today. John, back to you.
Rita, let me ask a couple of questions about the Ayub Khan and his associate who were arrested in Fort Worth on a train. Is the thought that they were close to conducting a hijacking themselves on this plane that landed in St. Louis, or is the thought that perhaps we have come across the 2 older masterminds of this plot who let the younger suicidal pilots carry it out?
Well, it's interesting because I asked authorities those exact questions, and as you point out, they are much older. I mean, one is 51, the other is 47. Most of these hijackers, from what we were talking about yesterday, all the 19 that were on the flights, usually they're in their 20s or 30s, it seems, from looking at the roster that comes from law enforcement. So these men do seem older. What I'm being told from law enforcement officials is, first, they are not quite sure if these men are the mastermind. They do not necessarily believe that. They moreover think that they may have some important information about the network, that they were also possibly players in the network and maybe were possibly planning something else themselves. However, they do stress that they're not quite clear if they were about to do something on this flight. It was originally a Newark to Texas bound flight that, as I pointed out, was halted in St. Louis when they grounded all the planes. But it is not quite clear if they were about to do another attack or if they were bringing information and materials possibly to somebody else. But I am told from law enforcement sources that they are cooperating somewhat and getting some information from them. So they appear to be very helpful at this point to the case.